Welcome to Friday Nights of Yore, where we talk about the history of high school football. And with that, go over this week's presentation. Let's get started. There's a link below as far as my overall ratings. I've just updated the top 25 of all time, top 100 of all time programs, and last week I went over the top 25 teams of all time. Future videos this week is, we're going to talk about future videos. This week's top 25, we're going to talk about the top 25 of all time with at least 100 seasons, and then go over in more detail the top 25 of all time with at least 25 seasons, and then I'm going to go over some stats regarding my database. First two videos I had is just going over the algorithm, how things are calculated. The second video last week was all-time great teams from 1877 till last year. This week is top programs. And next week we'll go over the national championships, media national championships versus if I looked at it as if they had computers back in 1910, how those would compare to what was voted at the time as the top team in the country. And then after that we'll go over the top decadal teams, 2010s, 2000s, and 1990s. And then I'll look to go to the individual states and maybe back and forth after that. So, this week's rankings. 3 states are now playing, and they're all represented in the top 25. These are only of teams that have played. They're not preseasons. They're based on rankings coming in from last year and how they performed in the games they've played this year. Coming in at number 25, Lawrence North out of Indiana. We've got Thompson, Alabama, and then all the Utah schools that are dominating because they've played 2 games. Sandy Alta out of Utah, number 13. And then the top 12. Salem Hills is coming in at number 1 for this week. I think they've got, I don't know, I was going to say that they've got a tough game, but I'm not sure about that this week. Brighton, number 2. Fremont, Utah. Ouachita County, I don't know if that's Ouachita County. Sky Ridge, Skyline, Mountain Crest, Park City, Bear River, Layton, Morgan, and Bingham. All Utah schools, basically because they're playing 2 games, and the statistics get up to these very high numbers after the first 2 or 3 games, and then they kind of start coming down as the statistics become more real. So, getting into the meat of what we're going to talk about this week. Talking about, I wanted to include this as far as having it in the presentation or what we talk about, because these teams here are what people from each of these states that are representative think of as this is our great teams. These are the who's who of high school football from year in year out. Or look at some of these teams for 125 seasons being played, and I have ranked. So Meridian out of Mississippi, Texarkana, Texas, Norman, Oklahoma, Pine Bluff, Corsicana, Texas, Easton out of Pennsylvania, number 20, Marshall out of Texas, Little Rock Central, Montclair, New Jersey, Sherman, Texas, Wichita Falls, Warren G. Harding, St. Angelo Central, Longview, Texas, Valdosta, Georgia. Great high school and great winning tradition out of the college. I think both of the high school and the college are 2 of the winningest programs in the respective leagues or Barbosa is winningest percentage in college history, and are winning most wins. And same thing with Valdosa out of Georgia. I think it's one of the top in the country as far as overall wins. New Orleans Jesuit, Tyler, Texas, Lufkin, and out of my home state, Muskegon, Amarillo, Abilene, Waco, all out of Texas, McKinney out of Ohio, Temple out of Texas again, and overall Maslin, Washington. And some more detail as far as Maslin. I think they went by Maslin for the beginning down in here, and then they went to Maslin, Washington, somewhere along the line. It's all the same school. Look at the coaches. I don't know all these peoples, but I highlighted a few of them. Paul Brown, we all know him, and that's the heyday of Maslin football, although looks like they've really ticked it up in the last few years and regaining some of that glory, being one of the number one teams year in, year out in Ohio. Lee Trussell, Jim is, I believe, is his son. Coached there for looks like 2 years, and then Earl Bruce. So you got quite a history of coaches coming out of Maslin's. Very interesting program. So top 25 of all time with at least 25 years. Coming in at number 25, Spring Klein Oak. 24, Colin Sills out of Georgia. Westbrook out of Texas. Arlington Lamar out of Texas. Harrison out of Georgia, number 21. The next set, everybody will know Concord de La Salle winning the longest winning streak in the nation. I think that's 110 games, or I think it was 10 seasons that they went without a loss. And then San Margarita out of California as well. Dutch Fork out of South Carolina coming into 18. Midland Lee out of Texas. Austin Westlake out of Texas. Seeing a pattern here with Texas teams. Brentwood out of Georgia. Christian Academy out of Shreveport, Louisiana. Pittsburgh Woodland Hills coming in at 13. Madison Central out of Mississippi. Trinity, Texas, number 11. So now we'll get into the top 10. Booker T. Washington, I got an asterisk here because when I was putting this together, I noticed that there was the beginning of the program was 1999, which would not be 25 years, and I believe I have Washington out of Pensacola in some of the 50s rankings. I didn't include this in here, but actually Booker T. Washington out of Miami, great team, but officially should not belong on this list, but I do have them still here in this presentation. Coming in at number 9, interesting, one coach, 1969 to 2020. Look at their progression. It's a small school out of, I'm not sure where in the state that they're at, but progressing, plays in schools around the state, top schools in the state in Louisiana and Texas as well, and they've also played some national games in their history. Looks like John Curtis took over from his dad, which I think is where the name of the school came from, and just look at the history of that as far as how well they've improved year in and year out. Plano East out of Texas. Look at kind of up and down here as far as history. Always a great program. We've got 30s, 40s. That's going to be a state championship level at a lot of states. And their best team looks like 2006. And that would have been coached by John Ringo. And same for 2010 and 11. great teams. And then again, 15 and 18, some of their best teams in history, as well as like the 1994 teams. If you have further information about the coaches than what I have right here, please send them to me. Number 7, Mound Marcus, or Flower Mound Marcus, out of Texas again. And there again, we've got initial down in the 30s and 40s, and then looks like when Randy Mays took over in 2001, they've just had a steady increase, and now they peaked in 2010, which would have been coached by Bryn Irwin, their greatest team of all time, at least by my rankings. And then another big uptick in 2015 with Jerry Stanford as the coach. First green and yellow team, again out of Texas, Cypress Falls, squeaking in with 27 seasons. As a lot of these teams are in that 30-year, 40-year range as far as seasons played. More steady though, as far as their history. Best team, like 2011 team, coached by Corby Meekins. Another Texas team, Houston Spring Westfield, 39 seasons. Their best teams are just recent. Looks like number 1 is 2015. Coached by Matt Meekins, and the next team, well, they've got a lot of good ones here at the 70 rank. Steady improvement. More traditional name that a lot of people would think is number 1 in the nation. It's got a great history with Jerry Faust back in '62. Started, and they played top caliber for their entire history, and they've actually gotten better since the 2000, which a lot of teams have as far as the level of play with the top teams. Coming in at number 3, Woodland, out of Texas. Very steady increase. The top team being just looks like 2014. Looks like 17 team, and it kind of dropped off last year. Looks like Jim Rapp, new system, and those can bounce back after a couple of years. We'll see. But Mark Schmidt did a lot of the work here. From 2004 to 2018. Improved that team, which is already improving through their history from 1978. Number 2, Odessa Permian out of Texas as well. Look at the records these coaches have had. I think that got one with just 15-15. Otherwise, these I got another one here. It's Scott Smith, 2003-2004 seasons with a 500 record, and as well with TJ Mills. But otherwise, these are phenomenal records: 23-1, 148-16. Gary Gaines, another 500 coach, but looks like John Wilkes' history of their greatest records with Permian probably established that team as one of the best in the history. And number 1 of all time. Recently taken over Permian as the best team with now 27 seasons and that program really turned around with these two coaches listed, Joey Florence, and then followed by Dave Hennigan. Joey coached from 2000 to 2013, and that's just a rock solid team ever since. And those are my top 25 of all time. Now some stats about the database I have, just if you're curious. This is a curve of all the teams ranked in the database based on year. So I can go back. The teams ranked by year, so they're actually a listing of schools, and some interesting things here. Since 2004, the number has been pretty steady. 2010 or 11, I believe I started including the Canadian schools, but they became very difficult to get in on a regular basis, so I'll try to pick those up down the road, but last 4 years I have not included Canadian teams in the rankings. And then the other graph is on this scale is the overall average ranking of all the schools. Hovers around 0 overall, but you can see a distinct decline from 2001, looks like, to 1953, 50, that it bottoms out. Don't have a good explanation for that. That's just probably a combination of data gathering and actuality, as far as we just have a lot better teams overall in the last 20 years. And definitely going back beyond this is just a reflection of data gathering, or the fact there's just so few schools with programs back then that they are the bigger schools, and so that average, that the way it's calculated is captured through this kind of this moving average in this program. Just some information as far as how this looks. Some interesting things as far as just the number of schools. Look at 1918, how it dropped off. It's going to be similar to this year as far as the pandemic and World War I. Same thing in 1944. It bottomed out during World War II. And then I've been focusing on the 1990s, and because before last year it was pretty much flat, so these teams have been added to the rankings this past year. And then just looking at min and max as far as the top team in the country versus the bottom team in the country. This is kind of how it looks over the years. Some things going back here, these are probably college teams that played, so there'd be one or two teams that a college would play, high school teams that a college would play, so they're captured in the rankings here. And then we've got some real big blowouts, or teams that are, you look at the history, it looked like they quit. And I think this is a reflection of a team that got beat by 222 to nothing, which is the biggest margin of victory. North Platte out of Nebraska had won that game, and reading the history, that team seemed like it just basically left the field, didn't play any longer, but the game continued. So that's it. Next week I'm going to go over the national champions that were voted at the time versus my retrospect as far as computer rankings of those teams that year, and which would be a computer generated our computer rated team versus those mythical national champions. And then September 10th, going over the top teams of 2010s, and then the 2000s, and then the 1990s. And I'll look in October to go to the individual states: Texas, Florida, Louisiana. Those are the top teams with the most winningest programs in the top 1,000. And we'll see what we do in later October and November. And that's it for this week. See you next.